speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover tomorrow. Just you wait and see.
War was declared on the 3rd of September 1939, a war which would differ from all others, a war which would show the strength of the British public, a war which would be renowned for its brutality and which would mourn the deaths of many thousands of people.
By singleness of purpose, by steadfastness of conduct, by tenacity and endurance, such as we have so far displayed, by these, and only by these, can we discharge our duty to the future of the world and to the destiny of man.
One man was to attempt to change this destiny, a man who struck terror into the hearts of millions, Adolf Hitler.
In seiner Rede rechnet Adolf Hitler mit den Feinden.
Hitler and his German troops attacked by land and sea, but most of their attacks came from the air. In an attempt to halt the invasion of enemy fighters, Britain launched a defensive plan. The Spitfire was sent to stop the German planes reaching the mainland, an operation more commonly known as the Battle of Britain.
Here is the midnight news. Up to 10 o'clock, 175 German aircraft had been destroyed in today's raids over this country.
They're also being chased home, and how they're being chased home. There are 3 Spitfires chasing 3 Messerschmitts now. Oh boy, look at them going, and look how the Messerschmitt... Hey, that is really grand. And there's a Spitfire just behind the first 2. He'll get them.
The German planes proved too large and too slow compared to the Spitfire's speed and manoeuvrability. Even with almost half the planes and an even bigger shortage of fighter pilots, they proved to be a tougher defensive wall than what the Germans had first expected. When the Nazis realised that they were losing the battle for air supremacy, they switched to a new strategy, the terror bombing of cities, often known as the Blitz.
Air raid shelters. The times I've been in that, air raid shelter was all waterproof, wasn't it? Galvanised. And it was wet through before you went in. And they were damned awful. Well, when you get somewhere about, from 10 to 14 in one, it's a hell of a lot, isn't it? Crushed in it and all.
With the cellar what was made stronger, we used to sleep down that. We used to have bags of coal, and we used to put straw on top of bags of coal and then blankets, and we all used to sleep down there.
Is there a raid on?
No, sir. Well, at least not here. It's over at Marsden, 7 miles away. Joe's been giving them all the morning, poor devils.
Yes, I thought I heard the sirens going in Shepley.
Oh, we don't take shelter for sirens here, sir. But if you hear whistles being blown, you take my tip and run like a ruddy rabbit.
After the raid, people would emerge to find the devastation that had been caused in the city.
When what they call flame bombs come over, when they started bombing, it weren't far from us, you know. It run down against Balfour Pictures, and that were a frightening sight. And then when you could get out and see it, well, it absolutely sent you mad, really, to see all the destruction it had made.
The Ministry of Home Security warns all civil defence and ARP services to be on the alert.
You know, you feel such fools standing there in a crater, pitch darkness of night, and holding mugs of tea. You see the men bringing out bombs. You feel useless until you know that there's someone there, actually in that bombed house, who's alive, and you can give that tea to. And then to hear the praises of the men themselves, so that tea is jolly good. Blood and dust out of my mouth. We feel that we really have done the job, and a useful job.
A firebomb dropped one day, so close to him they say that he deserves a medal, they all vow. But perhaps what you don't understand, he put the fire out but he didn't use sand, 'cause Mr. Wu's an air raid warden now.
The local defence volunteers were now known as the Home Guard, and well over 1 million men were recruited. Their duties were endless. As well as fire watching, they would make sure the public responded to air raids, and they would help in the emergencies when people were trapped under the rubble of bombed houses.
She said, "What do you do in the Home Guards?" I said, "I've got to stop Hitler's army landing." She said, "What, you?" I said, "No, there's Harry Bates and Charlie Evans and..." I said, "There's 7 or 8 of us all together." I said, "We're in a group."
While these men protected the homeland, many soldiers were abroad fighting for their country. They lived in uncomfortable conditions and spent agonizing months away from their families.
Perhaps I should remind you here that these were men of no ordinary caliber. They'd been 9 days in that little space I mentioned, being mortared and shelled, machine-gunned and sniped from all around. For the last 3 days, they had had no water, very little but small arms ammunition, and rations cut to 1/6. Luckily or unluckily, it rained, and they caught the water in their capes and drank that. These last items were never mentioned. They were airborne, weren't they? They were tough and knew it. All right, water and rations didn't matter. Give them some Germans to kill, and even 1 chance in 10, and they'd get along somehow.
Went into Burma October 1944 from India. In your tank, when you're in action, it was like being inside an oven, literally, because you had to close down. You'd be sat, same as I went behind a gun. The top of your trousers would be full of sweat, like a little water pool all around you. When you fired, if you fired your gun, you get a backlash of cordite. And sometimes when you got out the tank at the end of the day, whatever you're doing, you're literally spitting cordite out all day. There, you could actually fry an egg on the outside of the tank. It was that hot.
While abroad, soldiers encountered many dangerous incidents, and without thought for their own lives, carried on doing their jobs.
We were held up for a while, because they'd blown a bridge, only a small bridge, but we had to wait while engineers came up for a small Bailey Bridge across. 1,500 weight Dodge went across first. That got a direct hit. I think there were 2 killed in that. It was a HQ lorry, actually. Then we went over, and I think we did root out that gun that fired on that. Because we didn't see it, but because we were on the road, and they were in like a wood.
Well, I was called out one day with medical corps. They come to me and said, "Will you take ambulance down to another barracks? There's a captain shot himself." So I goes down with these 2 medics, and he's laid in bed with a gun in his hand and his eyes wide open. And I says, "You better go in and take his gun off him first." And they wouldn't go in, so I had to go in, take his gun off him and close his eyes. Then they come in and got him out, because let us face it, we were only young, even medics were only young. So there was something new.
I went for a swim in the river, and we're all ordered out at once, and there were a few Jap bodies floated by. See, and they wouldn't let us go in again.
Meanwhile, back at home, there was another fight on, the fight to provide food. In January 1940, the government issued ration books, a system which would minimise the amount of food any one person could purchase.
I get along without sugar. I never drink any tea. Eggs and bacon, beef and ham, these things don't worry me. I won't eat the neck of a chicken. To me it don't mean a thing. But one thing I always crave, and that's why you hear me sing.
With rationing, I think you got 2 ounces of sugar, each person, 2 ounces of butter, probably 4 ounces of meat, I think it was. Potatoes, there was none. There was dried potatoes. No eggs, because they were dried eggs. You had a quarter of sweet coupons to last you a month. The people what smoked, them days, you was queue and queue and queue all the time. So they could get extra packet of cigarettes. But we still got through.
Once again, the rattle of a German army on the march echoes in Europe.
Underneath the lantern, by the barricade.
The summer of 1944 saw the Allied troops occupy the whole of southern England. They were there for one reason: the journey across the Channel to invade the German troops in northern France. 1.5 million American soldiers had been shipped across to England to join 2 million Allied soldiers. This was without doubt going to be the biggest operation of all time, an operation which would decide the fate of the nation.
If we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty. So bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
On June the 6th, 1944, orders were given to begin Operation Overlord, an operation which would see 176,000 men land on the coast of France in the first 2 days.
Supreme Commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower.
People of Western Europe. A landing was made this morning on the coast of France by troops of the Allied Expeditionary Force. This landing is part of the concerted United Nations plan for the liberation of Europe.
We went on exercise, as we thought, not knowing about anything about D-Day. We finished up taking Roman commandos to Golden Beach. We thought it was exercise.
But now we are at war. And we are going to make war. And persevere in making war until the other side has had enough of it.
I'm talking to you in midair from a Mitchell bomber. This is invasion day. It's just before dawn, and we're on our way over to the coast of France.
All we saw were troops landing. Well, really, to me now, thinking about it, it's like a bleeding nightmare. But then I didn't think nothing about it. It was just part of the job.
It isn't quite light enough to get a real glimpse of these brave chaps, but there I can see right down below quite a number of tiny dots. I wish I could see clearer, but it's the most exciting thing to think that these brave men are at last launched on this job.
We will stand and fight here. If we can't stay here alive, then let us stay here dead. I want to impress on everyone that the bad times are over. They are finished.
D-Day was Hitler's main downfall. He later began revenge attacks by sending across the V1 weapon, otherwise known as the buzz bomb. These pilotless bombers were mainly aimed at London, where they claimed over 6,000 lives. Then the good news arrived.
The German radio has just announced that Hitler is dead.
Yesterday morning at 2:41 a.m. at General Eisenhower's headquarters, General Jodl, the representative of the German High Command, and of Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea, and air forces in Europe to the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Britain and its allies had at last won the war in Europe, but the country still could not rest.
I do not intend to be responsible for any suggestion that the war is won or that it will soon be over. That it will be won by us, I am sure. But how and when cannot be foreseen, still less foretold.
Britain was still at war with Japan, and many could not rest until it was over, and all the servicemen were returned home safely. They became known as the Forgotten Army.
But when war was over, we were getting plenty of ear-downers. We were glad it were over, but we were still worried about this one over there. You see, we'd still got one over there, so we couldn't rejoice too well while that was on, you see.
In August 1945, war in Japan was declared over. Now the world was beginning to count the cost of war. 56 million were dead worldwide. In Britain, 264,000 servicemen were killed, as well as 60,000 civilians.
I'm terribly sorry.
Yes, it's a bad show.
He was a great friend of yours, wasn't he?
I knew him pretty well.
Is there any hope?
No one saw him or his cruel daylight. A person was missing, I suppose. For 3 months, anyway.
I think if I had to hear someone was killed, I'd rather hear it at once than hear it first as missing.
It is rather an ugly word, isn't it?
Well, it's like anything else, isn't it? The most worrying thing of the war is to see if your family's all back together, plus the lads what's been fighting, and the lasses, so they're back home. I think that's only the worrying there is, to make one big happy family again, isn't it? I mean, there were a lot what lost everything, didn't they?
My husband were in the army. He was in 6.5 years, but he came home safe 7 months after the finishing of the war. Didn't come home to stay for first leave after the war, 7 months. And they had a big party then for him. Like any soldier that came home, or any Air Force man, anybody, they had a party made for them, all trimmed up and long.
Although the end of the war was a time for rejoicing, nobody could forget the brave men and women who gave their lives for the freedom of this country.
So will you please say hello to the I want to impress on everyone that the bad times are over. They are finished.
But I hope my grandkids never see it all like that.
I fought for my country, and which I would do again.
This was their finest hour.
Trumpet call of freedom, the war song of a great people, the first sure notes of the march of victory.
But I know we'll meet again some sunny